Hot off the press, we have a new Watchtower. Well, I suppose I don't really print Watchtowers as much anymore. It's more like digital, so this is not really off the press, but more like down the pipeline, straight out of the pipeline. If the pipeline was the governing body's colon, we got ourselves a new Watchtower, and holy heck, it's a bit of a doozy, a humdinger. So we're talking about education, we're talking about Bible principles and how those can be interpreted into you making a personal decision. Yes, I'm using cringe air quotes because Watchtower talks about personal decisions a lot, even though you have to choose from like a personal decision menu that they give you, yet they call it a person. It's very strange in this here Watchtower. So we won't banter around too much here in the intro. So let's do this. Hello and welcome back to the JW Thoughts channel. My name is Wally, and today we are looking at the latest Watchtower. Quickly before we get into it, don't forget to drop a like on that video. It takes up half a second and it makes a massive difference in how the YouTube video performs in the YouTube algorithm for the YouTube audience, for the YouTube content creator, so he can get noticed and it makes him feel better about themselves. That's me. Do it. Thank you. So the first article here is Bible principles. Why are they important? And nothing is terribly interesting about the first part of this, so we'll kind of glaze over that. It's talking about the basic idea of principles and how there's laws that we can find in the Bible, but we can extract a basic principle from those laws because they teach us how God wants us to think about other people. And you know, for me it's a bit of a head scratcher, like why God would have a law that if you sold your daughter or your son, that the son would somehow be more valuable if you were to sell them. So I don't really know what principle we're supposed to learn other than women are less valuable in the eyes of God. Or I don't know why God would say it's okay to beat humans that you also own. I don't really understand how owning another human being and beating them is going to teach me a vital principle about how I'm going to live my life here in 2026. But hey, I ain't the big man upstairs, so I'm just a little peanut brain. Who am I to question this sage wisdom? But there is a little picture here, and it is going to be correlated to paragraph 12. Jehovah does not want us to hate others in action, word, or even thought. If someone continues wrathful with his brother or verbally abuses him, the individual who is wrathful would still be accountable. In fact, these are the very attitudes and actions that lead to murder. And then it goes on, how can this apply today? Because these feelings can stir up hatred in our heart, which may lead to hurtful speech or actions. This includes gossip and slander that can damage or ruin the reputation of others. So even before there were such things as social media, blogs, the internet messaging apps, Jesus provided a principle that would alert mature Christians to the possible dangers when using these modern tools. In all situations, though, we should avoid hateful speech that could lead to what is often called character assassination. Now, Watchtower would never, ever in a million, billion, cajillion years think about using hate speech, would they?
But the earth had become ruined in the sight of the true God, and the earth was filled with violence. Yes, God looked upon the earth, and it was ruined. All flesh had ruined its way on the earth. Do you see the connection? Rather than speaking of just the planet, the scriptures here link the ruining of all flesh or people with the ruining of the earth. Likewise, today, just as mankind is harming the actual planet, the world under Satan's control is also ruining all flesh. In both ways, the earth is being ruined. How so? We see it in their so-called gay marriage. We see it in the gender blurring that the world is promoting. You don't have to be a man or...
We receive letters at times. First, let's talk about apostasy, and we'll call it...
Jehovah's purpose for humans is clear, but Satan's world now says that marriage can be between two men or two women. Again, really? We can be certain that promoting this corrupt view is part of Satan's attempt to ruin mankind, to make them so abhorrent to Jehovah that he would abandon humans and his purpose for mankind in the earth. But that will...
I hate them.
Well, here's a question. Are apostates today as reprehensible as those ones that Jude mentioned in his short letter? Are they devious? Or maybe they're sincerely trying to help poor, misguided witnesses? No, they're devious. Have you ever noticed that apostates generally do not try to reason from the Scriptures? Why not? Because they know we know the Scriptures and we would see through the twisting. Instead, they pick at the organization, they twist truth, they use lies, half-truths to try to grab a mind.
I hate them.
First, let's talk about apostasy, and we'll call it spiritual poison. Now think about poison. What's the best way to avoid being poisoned? Well, we have to recognize poison when we see it and then avoid it. Now, not many of our brothers and sisters would deliberately get involved with apostates, but it could happen without our realizing it. We receive letters at times from brothers and sisters who are troubled by something they saw on a web page, an accusation, a rumor about the society or about the organization. And the problem is, they had no idea that apostates were behind it. Now, another person might say, well, I can see where those warnings about apostates apply to so-and-so. He's weak, but don't worry about me. I'm spiritually strong. I can handle it. That's like a weightlifter, thinking that he can drink a vial of poison and it won't hurt him because he's so big and strong. We are not so strong, so spiritual, so intelligent, that we can't be affected by the poison of apostate ideas.
I hate them.
This is a fact. The homosexuals that are designing these clothes, they like you in tight pants. That's who likes it, not spiritual people.
Hate speech is bad, except if you're someone that the Watchtower leaders don't like. Then hate speech is completely acceptable. If they want to marginalize someone because of their gender, their religion, or just their attitude towards Jehovah's Witnesses in general, they can say whatever they want. They can call apostates poison. They can say that apostates are mentally deranged and being led by Satan. That's okay. That's not considered hate speech because Watchtower doesn't like those people. And I think it's a good question to ask. Are the leadership of Watchtowers holding themselves to the same principles that they want regular Jehovah's Witnesses to hold themselves to? I don't think I said that entirely correctly, but you know what? You get the gist of what I'm saying. It's an important thing to clock, especially if you've recently left or in the process of waking up. Look at the leaders and really, really pay attention when they say stuff like this. Oh, we wouldn't want to do a character assassination. And then they'll go on to do a character assassination all the time about the people that they don't like. It's not about the actual principle. It's not about any sort of basic comprehension of moral behavior in a social landscape. It's all about, do we like you or do we not like you? And if we like you, we're more than willing to turn the other way and not really pay attention. And if we don't like you, we'll just make stuff up and do character assassinations. Oh no, they're trying to deceive you and lie to you at every turn.
Again, really?
And the next article, Your Conscience, Use Bible Principles to Train It. It goes and talks about how God gave us this beautiful gift of free will, and then immediately set upon stacking rules upon rules upon rules in order to control you. And then Watchtower came along and decided those rules weren't quite enough. Let's add a few thousand of our own, and now bada bing, bada boom, you get the Jehovah's Witnesses who have been rolling back some of those rules that they've had over the last few decades because they realize the Bible doesn't actually talk about those. But we'll see how this completely unravels in their own face. I don't know who writes these, but their ability to just like have a cohesive thought seems to be fractured somehow. I don't really get it, but paragraph 5, what is the conscience? Our conscience is our inner sense of right and wrong. Our conscience is like a judge inside of us who can either accuse or excuse us from our thoughts and actions. But this little bastard can be broken because in paragraph 6 it says it can be negatively affected by our upbringing, our culture, and our sinful desires. The Bible says that our conscience can become weak, defiled, seared as with a branding iron, or even wicked. Such a conscience no longer acts as a guide. It is like an inaccurate scale that needs to be recalibrated. Our conscience then must be properly maintained in order to keep it in good condition. Well, boy, howdy, hey. I wonder how we're supposed to do our maintenance. Take it in for our 5,000-mile oil change. Make use of study tools. Before we can apply Bible principles, we need to be able to identify them in the scriptures. For example, what if your Bible student is reluctant to stop smoking? He may reason, smoking is not mentioned in the Bible, so how do we know that it is wrong? Seems a pretty valid question if you ask me. How can you help him find the applicable Bible principles and reasons on them? One valuable tool is the research guide for Jehovah's Witnesses. You could direct your student to the heading Tobacco and Smoking. And what will you find under this subheading? Consider 5 of the principles mentioned in that article. 1, we should not become a slave to something that leads to death. Alcohol. We should avoid anything that would harm our body. Driving a car, walking upstairs, going to the gym, playing basketball, and also alcohol. Jehovah wants us to serve him whole-souled. Cool. We should not harm others by our actions. This is something that I brought up to some of the elders in one congregation I was in because they drove like absolute maniacs. They all drove like 25 miles over the speed limit. I'm not even kidding. It would be like a 25 zone and they would be going 50 through residential streets going 50 miles an hour. And I'm like, how does this not like align with Bible principles? This should be like a pretty top priority because it's just so demonstrable that driving that fast in certain conditions can be detrimental to human life. And they didn't want to hear anything of it. They didn't want to consider my point, just sheepishly look down like, well, like what? You have a terrible driving record. You have all of these tickets, and yet you're going to give a talk and talk about how, we can't smoke because we wouldn't want to harm others with our action. Truly, truly mind-blowing. 5, Jehovah can give us the strength to do what is right. So even though smoking is not specifically mentioned in the Bible, the principles found therein can help your student discern Jehovah's thinking. But this is the fundamental problem, is that this is puppet Bibling. You can say, this principle helps us arrive at the correct conclusion for this. But those principles can be used in any way, like a puppet, to say anything that you want. At one point in time, Jehovah's Witnesses use the Bible to say, no, you must keep track of the hours you spend. That is part of your sacred duty. And that's what the Bible wants. Look at the Bible principles. And then they said, haha, psych. Wow, psych. When's the last time you've heard anyone say psych? Well, I guess about 8 seconds ago. And it goes on and on and on. Having a beard, wearing pants. You can go on and on when Jehovah's Witnesses change some of their rules that they previously said, well, we don't do this because of Bible principles, but now it's allowed because the Bible's silent on it. This is puppet Bibling. This takes away God and the Bible and spirituality and condenses that down into the thoughts and opinions of people. That's it. This is an organization that's run by people, and when you look through the history, and I spend a lot of my time looking through Watchtower history, you see clear examples of the rules at that time reflecting who is in charge. Whoever's in charge has their own style, has their own niche, has things that are particularly important to them, and they now have power to implement those things. It's not that complicated. It is just as simple as that. And the next article is Make Wise Decisions Regarding Additional Education. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that this is the official Watchtower stance. I guess for those that have never been witnesses, they have this weird idea if they hear something like an announcement. It's not like official canon until it's printed in the pages of a Watchtower. Once something is printed, boom, that's like the final stamp. So a lot of times they'll make an announcement, they'll say something, and Jehovah's Witnesses will process this as like a beta test. Maybe there's going to be a few additional adjustments about how it's going to work or something. One of the things I do whenever there's a big change, I go on this JW forum where active Jehovah's Witnesses talk about things. And a very common theme when there is a big announcement that's made in video format or letter format, like a letter that's read at their congregation meetings, people will say, well, yeah, I see what they're saying, but let's wait until there is an official statement in the Watchtower, because that's when, all adjustments and everything have been handled and taken care of. It's not just a talk at an annual meeting, but this is official now. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So this article is Make Wise Decisions Regarding Additional Education. I have yapped about their switch up when it comes to additional education, going to university a lot, so we won't linger here too much, but it is interesting here in paragraph 4. The Bible says that each person must carry his own load of responsibility. That's each adult Christian, I can't read, must make his or her own decision about whether to obtain additional education. And then in the footnote, it says, in the past, our publications have discouraged Christians from obtaining certain types of additional education. So they do at least acknowledge that this was discouraged. If something is discouraged in a Watchtower, it's a no-no. It's a landmine. You can't step on that, or else you're going to have some type of consequence. So the most common one was if someone was an elder or a pioneer, or had some type of service, and their child had the opportunity to go to university and they took it, then they would have their qualifications called into question. So the guild would all get together and sit around the round table and discuss if this person should still qualify as an elder. They have training videos that I've shown, and I've talked about it. So yeah, I've talked about this a bunch. You can find it on the channel. It won't be that hard to get into. Hi, Editing Wally here. Don't know why I just waved like an absolute idiot, but hi, I was editing this video, and there was one thing that I did also want to mention, and that is this paragraph here where they mention that there are options available to people now, such as online courses. And in the light of them just very recently, within the last year, changing their stance on people getting higher education, or additional education as I call it, They're trying to make it seem like these online courses, like, oh, well, hey, there's these online courses you could take, so maybe you could take advantage of that. And it's like, wait, haven't these been around for a very long time? Like, correspondence schools even have existed for a long time. So I don't really understand why they're trying to make it seem like there's this newfangled thing called online courses, when previously Jehovah's Witnesses had options to pursue higher education that wouldn't have violated any of the things that Watchtower had said about it. If their main argument was that, well, you're going to have a lot of associates and stuff with bad people wanting to party and go to frat parties. Well, what about someone that wants to go and take courses for adults, maybe a night school, something that's actually catered for people who have kids or are, doing education later on in life. Those have been available for a long time as well. You don't have a lot of wild parties, like people are there, thinking about their kids and their future, not how hammered they're going to get and if Stacy is going to show up to their party. Sorry if your name is Stacy, but apparently in my head, I think you're a slut. Anyway, I just don't really understand how they refuse to allow people to work within their own rules, essentially is what I'm getting at. I remember there were two separate individuals in one of the congregations I attended, and both of them had done that. They went to a trade school at night, and everyone made a big stink about it. There was problems with, other people had problems with it because they were attending school and education, and you're supposed to leave things in Jehovah's hands. But they were not, indoctrinating themselves with evolution. They're not going and studying philosophy. They're not breaking any of the things that Watchtower says are the dangers of going to school. And yet they still had problems with elders and a general perception within the congregation. Because at the end of the day, when Watchtower discourages something, it's off the table entirely. There's not really, or there wasn't any room for them to navigate within those circles. Now, they just kind of flipped people off and said, hey, if for a year I have to show up 15 minutes late to every meeting, but I still do show up, I'm going to go and take those night classes. And mad respect, shout outs to them for forging their own path. But it is interesting how now they're saying, oh, well, now there's these things called online classes. It's like, there have been options available for Jehovah's Witnesses that want to continue their education, and yet they still discourage those anyway. Anyway, this is end of editing, Wally. So I guess since I said hello like a goober, I'll say bye. But there is one thing that's like JW psychology in this article that I did want to talk about briefly, and that was with having an endless series of questions that you ask yourself to the point where you get so exhausted that you don't do the thing. So hopefully this will make sense. So here's paragraph 16. Contemplate also the type of work you are likely to find. Will you enjoy it? What will the work environment be like? Is it an industry known for being unsafe, competitive, or stressful? How much money does that type of work typically pay? Will it be enough to support yourself? Will you need ongoing education to keep the job? Most important, will it allow you to put kingdom interests first? This is a super common way that Jehovah's Witnesses will try and get you to not do something without specifically telling you that you can't do that thing. They will have this barrage of questions. Well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? And what about this? And at some point, one of these questions will be like, hey, maybe I can't answer. I don't have a good answer for this thing. I'm just not going to do it because I want to play it safe. Having been a Jehovah's Witness and experienced this so many times, when you have a thought, man, I would like to do that. And in Watchtower fashion, you ask yourself this long series of questions that leaves you exhausted and tired to where you throw your hands up in the air and say, I won't be bothered. It's too much work anyway. And this, I think, is something that might linger. For me, I definitely think that this is something that affects me as I move forward and on with my life, is over analyzing something and asking so many questions and trying to get every single little detail that it gets you into a decision fatigue state where you start just not like moving. Sometimes you're just like, I'm so worn down by asking all of these if, ands, whats, and buts that you don't just, go and do it. And I think that I'm not a special person. You probably are not a super special person either. The reason I say that is because if I think something, there's a good chance that you probably have thought the same thing. I'm not terribly unique or special in that way. So this is something that I've struggled with. If it's something that maybe you didn't think about or weren't aware of or didn't know the origin story behind it, well, here you go, Christopher Nolan, Batman Begins style for you. when you pay attention to these watchtowers and you see this, it can really trigger that, oh man, that is a Jehovah's Witness mindset thing that I might be doing when someone asked me if I wanted to go to a party, or if I was thinking about taking a vacation, or I was thinking about shifting careers, or trying to take up a new hobby, and then getting weighed down, bogged down. One of the big ones too is with friendship. That is a big thing people struggle with whenever they are leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, is how do I make friends? Where do I find friends? And this decision fatigue, I think, can be a factor in that, because it's, well, what if they're not going to like me? What if we're not going to have, well, what if they're religious and they invite me to the church? That's going to be triggering. Well, what am I going to tell them about birthday? I've never celebrated. And you just do all of these questions to where you just get so tired, you throw your hands up in the air, you turn on Netflix, I guess. There's some kind of all right shows every now and then. I've been watching more TV than I normally do. Netflix's catalog is actually abysmal in my opinion. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Why am I saying that? Anyway, this is just something that I thought was worth mentioning. If you find this or find yourself doing this, it might be something that's worth taking some time to really dive into it and see if that's something from Watchtower that does still affect you to this day. Yeah, that's about all I have to say with the additional education thing. So let's go into what I think is probably the most interesting aspect of this article in this Watchtower. Respect the decisions of others. This is pretty rich, coming from an organization that, at least when I was in, it was a police state. It was self-policing, and if you couldn't successfully self-police, then your friends and family would all tattletale and be looking for opportunities to catch you slipping. It's a very toxic environment where people are only listening and watching, so you might trip up so they can tell the elders. So if you have someone that doesn't like you very much, they can really make your life miserable and go to the elders. Well, Wally said this. Well, Wally did that. He wore that. And it's just a very annoying, stay in your lane, mind your own dang business sort of situation that happens. So it's interesting that they have this respect the decisions of others, because when I was a witness, that wasn't true. And I should be clear here. There were times when I was that tattletale. They're like, oh, well, you really should talk to the elders about this. Oh, you don't want to do that. I've been there on both sides of that myself, so I'm not better than anyone else, clearly. So anyway, have you ever felt unfairly judged because of a decision you made? Have you ever judged a fellow Christian on the basis of a decision they made? No doubt most of us could answer yes to both questions. Whoever wrote this is aware that this is a problem in the witness culture. When a fellow Christian makes a decision that we disagree with, we might feel the need to convince him to change his mind, or we might voice our concerns to others. Likely we have good motives. We love our brothers and sisters. We want what is best for them. So we do not want to see them make a decision that they will later regret. So this is essentially, you can have very pure motives, but your execution is terrible. And that's why people get meddling in everyone's business. Now, this is going to be a problem because Watchtower has made a series of significant changes that affect the Jehovah's Witness culture significantly. So they give a couple of scenarios about situations where people might judge others, and they're quite laughable. Scenario 1. Before learning the truth, a brother grew up with a father who abused alcohol. At a gathering, the brother sees other Christians drinking alcohol. He is disappointed and tells them that what they are doing is wrong. Watchtower, come on. We all know that there's probably one in every, we won't say congregation, one in every circuit. I know it happened to me several times at meetings where there was some old geezer that had a problem with anyone that would drink, and they wouldn't be shy. This wasn't something that they would just tell at a party. During a Watchtower study, these animals would raise their hand and, like flames coming from heaven, would denounce anyone that participated in a adult libation every now and then. So this is funny that they say, oh, well, this might be a problem. I'm pretty sure whoever wrote this has had the exact same, again, I'm not unique, I'm not special. I'm sure other people have had this experience where someone at a Watchtower study raises their hands and goes on an alcohol rant. Scenario 2, a sister has successfully battled a serious disease. Later, she learns that another sister has been diagnosed with the same illness. The first sister wants to help, so she pressures her friends to follow the same medical treatment she did, whether by means of a certain diet or through the use of conventional medicine or natural remedies. Natural remedies. Isn't everything kind of natural? I guess we won't get bogged down by that. This is weird. Watchtower also gives medical advice that isn't in the Bible. As far as I'm aware, unless some secret scrolls have been hidden away, have been found, and I haven't known about it. The Bible doesn't say anything about using blood for medical reasons, and it certainly doesn't say anything about using one of its core components, red blood cells, white blood cells, plasma, or platelets. And yet a Jehovah's Witness isn't allowed because of Watchtower telling them, giving them this medical treatment advice. They aren't allowed to use those. Not just having a blood transfusion, but also those main components. Now, if it's a subset of those main components, then it's up for a personal decision. So Watchtower, to the detriment, not even the detriment, to the loss of life of people that follow their religion, including children, will give people medical advice that will kill them. And yet they don't want other Jehovah's Witnesses to talk about a diet that was successful.
Again, really?
And this one has to be the best scenario 4. A brother grew up during a time when most people felt that it was inappropriate for men to grow beards or for women to wear dress slacks to formal events. A brother grew up during a time. I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s. And I'm pretty sure from worldly standards, that was very well accepted. It was normal. And yet in Jehovah's Witness land, it was against the rules, so no one did it. It has nothing to do with what is culturally accepted. They try and portray it as such. Oh, well, back in the day, having a beard was really a sign that you were a rabble-rousing rebel. Okay, but what about for the last 40 years? How long does it take to get the new light? Like, people aren't stupid. They're going to see right through this. Hopefully, unless they're just reading it and not paying any attention whatsoever, then it'll go over their head. But someone that's actually reading this with any modicum of intention is going to see right through this. Grew up in a time, brother, what are you talking about? You told me I couldn't, even though it was normal in the world. I cannot tell you how many conversations I had when I was a believing Jehovah's Witness that asked this same question in car groups, just at home playing Smash Brothers with my friends, playing ping pong at a bar, whatever the case was. This is a topic that comes up, or did come up, a lot. Why are we not allowed to grow facial hair? It seems absurd. Sure, yeah, maybe back in the day, in the 50s and the 40s, it was looked down on, but come on, like, what are we doing here in 2010 thinking this? So why does it take new light so long to, who really knows? While the brother is aware of the recent adjustments in our view of this subject, he insistently tells others that Christian men should not wear beards and that Christian women should wear dresses while engaged in theocratic activities. Well, again, Watchtower has specific rules. So, yes, you can, if you're a woman, wear slacks, but not if you're giving a part at the meeting or at a convention. So they still, to this day, have rules about when it's appropriate for a woman to wear slacks or not. So what all of these different scenarios that they're trying to play out really boils down to is Watchtower is trying to make a shift towards personal decision. They are using this expression, it's a personal decision, it's a personal matter, you got to be guided by blah, 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 way more than they ever did in the past. But as I've said before, this isn't an actual personal decision because it's not something that you thought about and came up with on your own, despite or irregardless of what Watchtower has to say on the subject. That would be a personal decision. If in 2005 someone looked at the Bible and said, I cannot agree with our stance on facial hair. It's insane that someone can have a mustache but not a goatee. Like hair here, hair here. So I'm going to make a personal decision to give myself an good old beaver goatee. Wow, well, that's a mental image for you, but that's why every time I see a goatee, that's what I see. So congratulations, you are infected with the same toxin that I am. You're welcome. Anyway, if someone did that, they would risk losing all of their privileges, never being able to give talks, never being able to comment, and it's a little bit iffy if someone can participate in the ministry. I know I've seen, when it was still outlawed, people go out in the ministry but not be able to give talks. So again, what essentially would happen is you put yourself as an outsider and you get soft shunned by people until you fall in line. That would be a personal decision. Someone doesn't consider what Watchtower has to say and makes a decision on their own. What's not a personal decision is Watchtower finally coming around and saying, okay, we will allow you to grow facial hair. And then people say, oh, I'm so glad I can make a personal decision to have a beard now. That's not a personal decision. It's not. That is them, you sitting down in the restaurant, and then they hand you a menu and say, hey, what would you like? Here are the 5 things that you can choose from. Well, sure, you're choosing from that menu, but the thing is they chain you to the table. You can't walk up and go to a different restaurant. You can't ask the chef if they can make any adjustments. If you don't like mushroom, they don't have any vegan options. Screw you if you're a vegetarian. Not going to happen here. So it's not an actual personal decision. And again, I'll relate it back to what I was saying earlier. This can affect you later on in life whenever you have to be presented with options in order to make a personal decision. I think it demonstrably inhibits your ability to do that later on in life. Oh, we got time. So I think a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses suffer from this. You have that decision fatigue almost where you got to answer all these questions, but then you also feel like you need someone to tell you. Every single video I upload on YouTube, just about, there's a comment. Well, who is this guy? What is he offering? What am I supposed to do? What religion should I go to? He's not giving me any options. It's like, brother, that is not my responsibility. That's called being a human adult in this world. Congratulations, you have freedom. Go use it. It's not up to me to tell you what to do with your dang life. You figure that out. I can barely figure out my own life. Why are you looking to me? So this is just an insane way of presenting things as like, oh, well, we need to be able to respect other people's personal decisions when people have been trained to tattletale on one another. People have been trained not to make personal decisions, but to go to Watchtower online library, see what the official doctrine is, and then work within those parameters. So it's always a strange thing whenever they try and make it seem as if these things are just up to individuals, but at the end of the day, they really aren't. I do see Watchtower going more and more in that direction, and I think it's going to only continue because, honestly, their rulemaking is embarrassing and pretty silly at the end of the day. It's kind of silly. Why can't you smoke? Why can't you celebrate birthdays? These things seem very silly. Anyway, that's all I got to say. I gotta best be getting on with the rest of my day. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're still around, don't forget to drop a like on the video, and with all of that, Stay safe, be kind, and don't forget to spend more time loving the things you love than hating the things you hate. Now go out there and have a good-ass day.